When considering a lot of different claims of different angles to approach various types of energy, there's a lot of people, it's almost confusing in a way. You got people saying, I don't understand. I thought Biden was green and then he's doing all of this stuff. He's not green. They show this list of stuff that says that, boom, actually he's been not stopping things but enhancing things. And then you've got other people saying, no, they've been trying to shut down things on federal land and they can't do state land. And then we still have the understanding here to say, okay, well, is there a policy to curb back energy production or not? Because we need to put that on the table and look at that and say, what would this mean? If you curtail energy production, let's say of oil, what happens to the price of oil? What happens to the price of gasoline? So if you cut back 50% in production, isn't that going to make the price of gasoline go up? So we have to sit there and look at the logic of this and say, well, what are all these people talking about? Where is all this going? What is the logic? And from there the scope gets far more complicated, because now we have to look at a very complex situation. We have to look at technology in a very complex way. And we're talking, again, millions and millions of parts. This is just not a simple thing as people would necessarily see it. There's something, that you might suggest, and you could say we can make something and invent something new that could work. But we're not sure there's going to be an investment there. Now, years ago, I wanted the EPA to use the cleanup sites where they were burning materials to dramatically reduce the volume material, which is they were basically getting rid of, reducing the size by 99% pretty much, I believe is what it is. But they were also venting stuff out into the air, putting all these different chemicals. So with me, I was saying, how about let's do a solution, go just a little bit further. Let's capture all these fumes, let's capture this smoke, let's capture these chemicals, this horrible mixture of chemicals, and we'll basically tank it up. We're going to put it into containers and save it. Couldn't get anywhere with that at all. Nobody's like, it was costly. Well, that's more of an expense. We feel we're done here on this, that this kind of finishes things up and then we're done, and we just keep doing the same process. I'm saying, yeah, but you're cleaning up sites, but you're still putting them out into the air. This is still an output situation, and we have to ask ourselves, if it's a cleanup site, it's not the same thing as a priority production site. A priority production site has to deal with market tendencies. In other words, if the prices of things are going up, you have to increase production. You're liable to be asked, can you increase production? We need to levelize pricing. Otherwise this can become a serious problem. So a main production is very different than saying we're doing a cleanup site. This completely changes how we can calendar stuff, how we can work with stuff, times of day, everything. So my viewpoint was pretty much what I laid out previously, except I withheld some items. I really withheld a lot of items. And this is where it gets funny, because a lot of people, they didn't have a clue, and I didn't want to give away my hidden cards. I had hidden cards, I didn't want to give them away. So you have people that they just like, we feel we're done and we just want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but you could take more time. You can deal with different processes. It's not as big of a problem. We have to pause a little bit to change out extra filters or, go through a couple extra processes, because it's not a priority emphasized production item directly tied to energy pricing. And, so I couldn't get anywhere with it. It's kind of a big, huge zero. Now, I'm going to give you the real quick rundown on the history of the hidden cards, my hidden cards. My hidden cards were, I tried to talk to people, I mean many, many decades ago, about types of waste in barrels and how to deal with things and what we could do. And a lot of people thought I was the big dreamer, you're following some of those other people who want to put everything in these containers that'll last 3,000 years and they cost more, and that's just ridiculous to spend the extra money. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't say that that's actually it. However, I was really interested in different types of metallic metals. They were basically spending $600 a barrel to get rid of these things, and the barrels were not that longevous in my view. I mean, they were longevous enough, but in my view, we needed to add another 300 years or so to the longevity of those barrels. But also, I had an alternate plan, and nobody wanted to go with that either. The alternate plan was, my card said that I see these chemicals as being highly useful for other types of science, other new products. And, I couldn't get anywhere. It was hard to get it, And, so what ends up happening is the metallic materials, so you got this heavy water type waste item that has materials that end up, there's $600, boom, to pay to get rid of them. Then all of a sudden, you fast forward and these things are worth $50 to $150 a barrel. Because now it's an additive to dramatically increase the PSI rating of concrete. If you want super PSI concrete, you infuse it with this stuff. Granted, I'm leaving out a couple of things about filtering, and there's only certain things that you want, and then you end up with this other byproduct. You got to deal with that. But still, I'm laying this out to understand that a product that I already knew, that a product that was controversially costing $600 to get rid of, and people didn't want to work with longevity in containers, was worth a small fortune. So it's like there's all of these square footage, all of these sites. It was six sites that wouldn't existed where all this stuff has been buried, and you don't want to disturb it because it's a real problem. It'll break open. But and now these things have changed significantly because these materials are now considered an asset. So there's the winning one right there. There's a winning one. In other words, my analysis, my understanding of chemistry, which I consider not very good in many ways, I have to consult everybody. I mean everybody. Because I'm so short of all these times. I got incredible brilliance in other areas, but when it comes to chemistry, I got to say, man, I have to talk to everybody. I have to ask questions, But still, I get into, that tunnel vision of focus, and I see things. I detect things, and I'm looking at these combinations. So, on the whole, there basically is a new rule of thumb that's hidden that virtually nobody understands. Waste products become different chemicals and chemical constructs, especially the more elaborate, the more different ways you have to go to work with those chemicals to do something different. So in other words, when you end up with constructs of 3,000 chemicals, 6,000 chemicals, you're really ending up with some incredible diversity of options. And someone looks at this and says, this stuff is so toxic, it's mind-blowing. I didn't say that it wasn't, excuse me. I never said that it wasn't as it is in the state that it's in. But effectively, these types of chemicals have all kinds of new hidden aspects to be able to extract, change, convert, and do things. But here's the key. We're not necessarily ready for it today. That means we need to consider how long we're going to store it. Is it a longevous container? How longevous? Is it a container that we can compute and say, yeah, we can put it in this container for 30 years or 50 years and then pick it up and drop it right slip it right inside of another container and just rechange that clock? There's a lot of different things. Or are we going to put it into containers going to last 300 years, guaranteed, or 600 years, guaranteed, or 1,000? How are we going to have? What's the decision on this? So, obviously price is affected, and location, storage, logistics, transport, distances, so forth, etc., all that. So, but still, there is a reality that chemicals that are a waste product inherently always become something else that's salvageable, something else that's usable. Remember, gasoline used to be a byproduct. Nobody knew what to do with it. They basically wanted oil, and they didn't know what to do with all this compressed, high flammable material. Well, you look at it, oh, gasoline, we do, but now it's a liquid, but what do we do with it? We got too much of this. So gasoline was a waste product. They were dumping it into the ground because they just wanted oil, many, many years back, before we had the engine science of today. So when you're working with all kinds of custom new ideas for composites and custom constructs, there's all these new options that start coming out. And as we have AI coming into play, AI is going to keep finding all of these new combinations as the new type of design modeling gets better and better. We have to work some stuff out, try it out, see how it really comes out. Is this going to work? And there's going to be changes, modifications, so forth, etc., but it's going to happen. So this basically means that a policy to say you have to realize that you want to put it in, everything goes into containers, and you have to figure this. Everything in those containers is going to go from a liability situation to an asset situation. It's going to convert from liability to asset. So you have to be able to get back after it. There is none of this business that you're going to put it someplace and leave it there forever and that's it, forever and always, you're done. No, it's an asset. It's going to turn into an asset. Somehow somebody, something, computer's going to figure out what to do with it. So you need to say, no, don't disperse it into the air. Let's collect it properly, put it in containers, and we review the situation and calendar it, basically. Because it's going to turn into an asset. And understanding is very important, especially when you're talking about extremely complex chemical combinations, because more and more of those will also become associated with custom electronics, with defense-related items. You can end up coming up with custom components that become essential to working with other chemical components. You're going to make some kind of new armor or something, and you just got to have this. So that's important. I'm going to move on to the next one here and deal with some of these other problems. We have a fire problem that is mind-boggling. It's just not going away. And it's in Canada. They have the same problem. It's just not going away. And you have all these firefighters. It's like 24/7, constantly working and saying, we need to address this. This needs to be done. This needs to be done. And you have lots and lots of companies working on all kinds of different solutions, all kinds of different gadgets. It's really a moving, flowing technology area. It's mind-boggling in many ways. And so you have all this stuff happening, and you got everything you can imagine. You got drones, you got this or that. But overall, we've got a lot of problems we need to review and resort. So if we look at environmental aspects, there's a wide array of things in the environmental aspects that we have to understand. So people will talk about, well, they just wanted to leave things on the ground, fall naturally, and let them go. This ended up becoming a disease problem, and you ended up with more trees dying faster. Ergo, you ended up with more remote wood rotting on the ground, instead of allowing people to collect it and utilize it. And now keep in mind, there is a certain amount of collection that's always allowed. There's a certain amount of wood taking that's allowed. There's a certain amount of cutting that's allowed, because people want good firewood. But there were people that wanted to go into other areas and remove fallen. And they were being told, no, our policy is this. Turns out that backfired. It actually backfired. Bad problems. We lost extra forest, substantial amounts of extra. We had extra extra rotting, extra drying. We lost moisture in our forest. And then when fires came, boom, extra problem, more explosive, more problem. So that policy turns out that it's not actually necessarily right. And we're going back and forth again and again between these various ideas. And here's the thing. You have to understand the complexity of green. Okay, the complexity is mind-boggling, and I do mean mind-boggling, because you've got green that's looking at what are the effects of greenhouse, and that's mind-boggling. There's so many ways to split that. It's incredible. So each area, there's all these tiered category areas. So the complexities of this are mind-boggling. So you have all these different people that are going to talk about animal psychology, environment, animal psychology, the need for a certain amount of acreage to basically be completely wild, not disturbed, not penetrated, not molested, and there's all of these reasons for stuff. Otherwise, you're going to change certain types of tendencies. So this is a very complex area to look at. It's never ending. It's just always growing. It's very large. So when you're looking at all these complexities, you have to sit there and keep listening to different people. So you actually do a lot of listening. And you're trying to absorb material, and then you're looking, or you're trying to snipe in a way. You're trying to find key points that are important to work with. And with me, I'm different. I'm trying to understand more than just the two sides of the argument. Way more. I have way more parameters in my head. But so it's there. So the truth is, at this point, is that we need to still do major overhauling respective to many of these field areas because of logistical realities. We have logistical realities that say that we still have encroaching factors on wildlife, and we have the reverse. We have not being good stewards, and animals are running out of food and water. So they're traveling further distances, and they're going into cities. So you'll have people see things, and as I've seen things myself, I've seen, a lot of wildlife that's quite incredible. When you're seeing basically panthers, and you're seeing, mountain lions, and you're seeing all kinds of things. You're seeing very rare items. Animals that have been supposedly extinct in California for 100 years, and boop, they're popping up. And people say, oh no, those just gravitated from Arizona or Mexico. Well, regardless, they're popping up. But there is a reality that there are creatures that basically fled human existence and hid. And they bred, and they stayed small, and they still exist. They still exist. So this is important because they change their mindsets, the environment changes, and they have to start moving again. So when you run into these various creatures, so we got a lot of categories that we have to think about. Like, we're going to think about the California jaguar, and people go, there are no California jaguars. I want to look you straight in the eye and say, you're full of shit. I ran into a pair of them, and one of them, this thing was big, This thing, head to tail, was more than 7 feet long. Its mate was about 4 feet. She was very pregnant. So, yeah, we have these creatures still living here in California. And this is, really important that we're going to have to deal with this. And there are problems, a lot of problems. The amount of naturalized territorial area that's necessary to consider these things as it is known today is a lot, and we're not going to have enough land to be able to keep doing this. So if you start working with projections to say, what do these look like in 100-year sequences, 50-year sequences, let's go forward 500 years, 1,000 years. And you're looking at sequences that aren't working. So that means everything has to be rethought. Everything has to be rethought. So my prep of different parameters in my head says, how do we rethink this? Because there's also other factors to deal with that people haven't thought of. And this means in order to deal with this, we're going to have to use completely different systems. It forces us into a completely different style of stewardship. It's a completely different upgrade and training for people to be able to come up with brand new, groundbreaking alternatives to work with all this stuff. You know, we're not just talking about adding drone technology. We're talking about adding new drone technology. We're talking about adding specialized drone technology with acoustical abilities, the ability to project sounds that can attract animals or drive animals away. And there are differences between unpleasant sounds, unwanted sounds, versus sounds that are perceived as dangerous, versus sounds that will put you into incredible paranoia. So the array of these various sounds just with these type of drone systems that can be utilized if you have the proper wide range pattern. And wide range means, how do you get the battery power for longevity? Well, you can have poles set up and little pads, and they can set down, and if the wind's not too much, they can sit there and recharge. You kind of sort of, yeah. Or you can bite the bullet and say we want a 13-sleeve multi-baffled container with this tiny, minute thing that's that's smaller than a lead pencil head. That basically is nuclear material. And then you take that and it's ground up into this microscopic powder, and you put it throughout your teeny tiny battery that is basically the size of a quarter. And this thing has enough energy to power 50 homes for 30 years. You stick that in a drone, and you now have a nuclear powered drone. Now, do you need batteries as big as that of what I just said? No, you don't. You can make them much smaller, much smaller. You can get the price down significantly. So you end up having batteries that have so many layers in the baffling that they could be right in the middle of the big fire, completely burn up, and the casing is not going to be breached. Ain't going to happen. You know, the military went through, I've seen lots of stuff, the military went through extreme procedures to make sure that whatever we got is going to stay intact no matter what the situation is. Bombs dropping right on it, next to it, whatever. You know, it doesn't go up. You know, we're talking extreme measures. So this casing is very real. It's more refined of a science and understanding, and it's much cheaper at a smaller rate. So if you use this, if you're using this with the drones, now you have a power of what? You can use higher amplitude transmissions. That gives you a longer range receiving and transmitting. That means you can work with AI. That means you can now have these systems that can do something. What can they do? What they can do is they can save our wildlife from fire, because we can't get people in the furthest remote ends when these things start up. Which means the only thing that we have an option to do is just set some kind of automated drones capable of surviving in high heat to be able to get as close as they possibly can and be able to affect moving wildlife. And this even means moving wildlife ahead of time. You know, detecting and say, yeah, the fire is 7 miles away, but we don't think we're going to put it, sometimes even 13 miles away in some instances. We're not going to be able to put it out. Let's get the wildlife moving. You know, one side, let's attract it one direction, let's push it the other. You know, get that wildlife and save its life that way. This also means we have to address emergency water and food drops. We need to have emergency situations where we're going to have semi-permanent miniaturized stations for feeding, water, medical testing, catch and go type systems to take a blood sample, to types of systems could catch and go remotely tag things, so we can be able to trace and all this stuff and deal with getting proper medical to these creatures to get control of the overall life medical situation. So yeah, these systems do have an inherent cost, but we have a recovery system for that. There's positive backflows that bring about basically a big payoff. If you're looking at where's the for-profit in this, it's there. I'm going to explain repeatedly various areas that overlap of why there's profit, and it's practically and it's the right thing to do. So we have things. Number one, I can't emphasize this enough. We need the meat. I'll say it again for those of you who don't understand. We need the meat. We also have other factors of other critters need the meat as well. So this is important. Now, let me shock you into reality, because I'm going to get to a point right now that most people jump over and don't include. And that's the part where people who think that leaving stuff undisturbed somehow is fixing things. That's a lie. That's a lie, because that's not the truth. Go out and hike into those areas. Let me tell you what you're going to find. You're going to find a lot of carcasses. What's happening with them? Disease isn't controlled. Okay. But bigger, the number one problem that you're going to run into, heat stroke. They couldn't find proper shelter. They literally died of heat. They died of lack of water. They died of lack of food, because the food supplies locally changed. All of a sudden, there's no food for them. This isn't a joke. Not a joke. So you're not getting anything done if you end up going, yeah, we're just leaving it all alone. God can take care of it. And the truth is, no, you're not a steward. You're not a steward. You have left these poor creatures to go through horrifically horrible situations. And they're starving to death, they're dying of thirst, and they're dying of heat. And people need to accept the truth. I'm just going to put it flat out onto the tactical table like that. You're not going anywhere with these policies when your wildlife is shriveling up like a grape. It doesn't do anything. You're not a steward. You're not a land steward. You're not fixing things. So yeah, this means we're going to have to rethink everything. Now into this, you've got a lot more into this. You've got a lot more complexities. You've got things like Indians saying, by the way, some of this land here, there, we own it. Y'all kind of screwed us. We need to talk some more. Okay, talk some more. Yeah, good thing actually. Do something. Other people never happen. Right? Yeah, you do something. I'm doing something, but a lot of people may not understand what I'm trying to get done. So I'm going to lay out more. More of this also is that basically we had people over 150 years ago being asked, hey, will you pay some more taxes? We'll pay you back so we can buy this land. Huge land grabs. I got a lot of stuff. You can look through my other stuff and see how I talk about that. But this is the real truth about it. The real truth. So there's a problem. People have been cheated. They never got paid back. They never got their residuals. They never got their stock, and they never got their little pieces of land that they're also supposed to be guaranteed. 9 out of 10 people got burned. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Look at the money that was paid for. Comparatively, those are peanuts. Those are peanuts. Even if you adjust for modern valuation today, it'd still be a peanut. You're still talking handfuls of peanuts comparatively to get a hold of that. What happened? Was there land theft? Yeah, that happened. And I'll tell you right now, I have to mention, please don't come up to me and start pointing to me. Well, here's some people stealing land. Look at this area here. They grabbed all this acres. And I look at it and I go, I'm going to slap you, man. This land is almost inhospitable, number one. Nobody wants it, number two, or wanted it. And number 3, they need 4 acres to find enough food to feed a sheep on that. You know, and you're going to say, look, these people are still, I don't want to hear it. Really, I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to say you couldn't find a couple instances, but I'm saying I think you're crazy. Now, you want to show me that you did research and you found some people that put a bunch of stuff in here where they took Greenland and lots of it. Yeah, that happens. I researched stuff, I found stuff myself. Talked to a lot of people over the years from time to time about that. They were very concerned, tried to buy land themselves. They were constantly discriminated against. And then all of a sudden they blow it and they go, now they're selling that land. And I was trying to get it for 7 years. This is not a joke, the corruption that's been occurring. So the understanding, you know, just take Google Map out, you look at Google Map, you look down on this, and you realize, whoa, we've been robbed. Whoa, we've been robbed. What happened here? And our forefathers actually had a lot of really good rules for a while, but those got bent all out of shape. Further, you know, future corruption comes in. Time moves on a little bit, and people elect people that they think are okay, and it doesn't work out that way. You also have leaders that violated the rules. In other words, they did something they weren't supposed to do, and said, well, I'm the leader, I can do whatever I want. No. You know, so problems. Yes, we have a lot of things we have to sort out. So when you're looking at these numbers, these are mind-boggling numbers. You know, and then you have all this different discrimination. You know, we do not have a consistent plan that says, like my plan to say, yeah, we're going to guarantee every citizen to be able to build their home with their own hands. You're a super vested citizen. If one of your members of your family goes back 150 years or more, you have multiple vestation. You're going to have things like, yeah, members of the family served in the military, members that, you know, go all the way back, they contributed financially into this deal. There was supposed to be stock, residuals, small land rights. Didn't happen. Okay, yeah, people got robbed. So restoring land rights and restoring lands has to occur. There's no way around it. And you look at Google Map, you look at these vast areas of land, and it's horrible. It's horrible. You have to be able to redistribute land. But here's the key. If you got to become a steward. Are you a steward? Are you full of shit, or are you a steward? Well, you have to be prepared to be a steward. There's a lot of complexities with that. Now, there's land areas. You know, I could sit there and tell you, by the way, I have a little tiny bit of Indian blood in me, a little bit of Indian blood. And so that means I can do the old Indian rock trick, okay? So, yeah, the understanding here that Indians are different. There's some variances between the tribes. And, you know, kind of sort of some of the stuff that I was told is, you don't own land, land owns you. The land's more longevious, so it's kind of a ridiculous concept. But you know, you still have to have certain lands that you have the right to visit and move, and seasonal. It's a seasonal thing. You move around because it makes sense, because you don't want to shrivel up like a grape and die. That's why you move around. And but if I jump forward on a lot of this, you know, the concept, a lot of Indians were not greedy. They didn't necessarily mind sharing if you played by stewardship rules. Can you play by stewardship rules? Do you have a clue even close to what they might be? You know, things like, yeah, you don't shoot all these buffalo just to take their pelts and leave them there to rot. No. You're only going to hunt for meat, and only meat you can use. You know, and then where's the stewardship part? Oh, well, you're going to stay around, and some of you are going to see what's going on with this. You have to provide for them. Oh, they're not going to have enough water. Oh, that means you have to figure out to make sure that you're going to get some water for them. Hi, welcome to stewardship. Hello. You know, so this is something that people, need to understand there's way more to this than you might think. And in modern versions, we're going to put a lot more into it. So, personally, I think myself, and I'm sure that there's got to be other Indians, that it's not a big deal if people are going to be stewards and they want to have a little bit of land themselves. It's not a violation. So if we say, how about we treat everybody that has all the super vested people, all those people have at least one or more families, go back 150 years, and say, yeah, we have to work with, analyze what you got. Oh, you were one of those people out of 10 that got big compensation. I'm sorry, we can't help you. You done got your cookies. Oh, you're one of the 9 out of 10 people that got burned. Oh, yeah, this is part of what this is about. We're going to have to get things compensated and get it going. That means guaranteed new home construction loans. Even if you don't have a job. You don't have a job? Perfect. You know what that means? You have time available. You could build faster than somebody else. So this is going to do good, because 30 cents on the dollar differential between wholesale versus retail, this is going to come out good. The government prints 30% on that. Guaranteed. We'll talk more about the back doors on that later. It's fantastically large. Fantastically large. Build a $300,000 home, 90 grand. The government's going to print 90 grand. It's always been this way. They might try to lie to you, and then I'd have to go through this long series of things to explain how they do that and calculate it, and then they do it. So this business about never-ending new taxes, I'm sorry, I don't agree. No, we don't need never-ending new taxes. First of all, we need the assets restored to people that were involved in the business deal to begin with. Stop the theft. I hope that makes sense to some of you. Stop the ripoff. Now, what about the stock? We're going to have to sit down. That's going to get a little complicated. We're going to have to issue the stock. What about the residuals? Oh, well, yeah, look at this. We got Alaska, Louisiana, all of these land purchases, all these deals, and there was supposed to be residuals. All the development was supposed to have a cut. There were supposed to be cuts for you. Did you get a cut when somebody did a successful mineral site? Is there a cut for you? Gee, nobody here says, yeah, there's very few people actually get a cut. It's kind of weird. Most of you are cheated. Now, where's the money going? Oh, the government's taking it straight off and spending it. Wrong. That's a ripoff. No. Money goes to the people first. They're the partners. They're the investors. What's going to happen? Oh, they're going to spend money. They spend money, taxes get collected. Stimulus. Now it works out more of an imbalance to localized taxes. But see, you get to spend it. Now, if we did that on everything, times the original shares we were supposed to have, or just prior to the year 2000, the average citizen of this country would have been collecting, I think I computed, $93,000 a year. $93,000 from residuals. And that's these teeny weeny tiny increments that mostly the government was just taking for themselves, because the government takes it and squanders it. If they give you your cut to begin with, many people are going to buy products. That means that somehow it translates out into jobs. Some people are going to make a bunch of money, maybe not just off the residuals, but a lot of people come in with spending their residual money, and now they have lots of money. They're going to start building, constructing, extending. And this means the government's going to start printing more money. There's this equation that keeps growing and growing, and you've got the federal assessment that keeps coming in again and again. So again, this is a very large economic modeling system. This is one of the reasons we needed the large economic modeling software that I would keep pushing over the years. So to understand how this all works, because my system's going to pay off the national debt in 3 years. And, then we're going to talk about at that point about eliminating taxes dramatically, going to a completely different asset stimulus-based cut system. We'll talk more about that at a later point in time, but it's an enormous amount of mathematics and work to explain how that works. Now, so into this, we were talking about the factors of understanding stewardship and controlling our environment, dealing with the fire problems. In order to deal with fire, you need water. You got to have water. In order to deal with the fire problem, you have to listen to what the firefighters are going to tell you. You're going to have to listen to the firefighters who are engineers. You're going to have to listen to these other engineers that are going to talk about we need this or that, or maybe this could work. It would be nice. Yeah. So, yeah, we're talking about lots of pipe getting run. We're talking about miniature lakes getting made. We're talking about flumes. We're talking about water development. So I talk a lot about that. I talk about the Arkansas, Mississippi, $12,000 a year getting made by Arkansans as a cut for selling water, as a cut for selling water that's flooding, that's drowning people that they don't need to begin with. That happens to be destroying part of the Gulf because it's too much flooding in there. So yeah, we have to manage this. It's a large investment, but it comes out. It comes out. We can restore the salmon. $4 billion a year industry back just prior to World War II, going into World War II. Today that'd be a $40 billion industry. It was wiped out. We were in a hurry to make power. We needed power. War was coming. We needed power. And people said, this is too many power plants. This is crazy. And then all of a sudden, boop, oh, we're at war. Everybody shut up. I said, oh, aren't we lucky we got all this power? Wow. Okay, but now we can rethink everything. We can use AI. We can restore salmon in ways that are so creative it's mind-boggling. Well, those are expensive sets of engineering. Okay, what part about $40 billion a year times 10 years is $400 billion is not understood. That's a lot of territory. Yeah, we can make a lot of real fancy fish lift systems and elevators and stuff like that. We can do a whole lot of stuff like that. Number one, we need the meat. Let me say that again for those of you who might be slow. We need the meat. We had 14 million people come into the country last year. We've got over 36 million people that have showed up in the last 3 years. Okay, in 6 more years, where are we getting the over 100 million cows from? Let me explain this very simply, logically, looking at the map. We need the meat. So, no bullshit. What are we going to do? We're going to have to give money to people. They're going to tell us what they need. We're going to have to pay for it. We're going to have to give them money. We can't sit around forever and always and do nothing. We're going to have to give people money to get the job done. We can't play games with this. Why? We have to be stewards. Why? We're going to need the meat. Okay? Now, we're going to go back into some different stewardship here. There's a lot of areas where the type of settlements, different type of little settlements and construction, we're going to need different types of people. And you're going to have to be able to make some sacrifices and say, okay, we need people, we want it to be a quiet area because we have an extreme remote situation and we have to get everything managed first before we can decide how much extra animals there's going to be to hunt. We have to get a hold of this, and that means we have to have people that are reasonable, quiet, skill set, ready to interface, deal with the massive complexities, the massive learning system. Let me say this again for the slow people. The massive learning system that's going to have to take place as we're going to start experimenting with these new systems, and we're going to have to start coming up with new types of creative housing. There's going to be a lot of remote drone stuff. We're talking camo drones. We're talking silent drones. We're talking all types of different situations where we're going to have to be stewards. And we're going to need brainy people to be able to deal with this. And it's part of the overall program that someplace into this eventually translates out into we need the meat and we need the knowledge. And we have to get over the fact that in the next 500 years, we're going to have to deal with brand new management systems respective to wildlife. wildlife is not going to be as wild as it used to be. Now we can ignore the problem, or we can become stewards and deal with the problem. And becoming stewards and dealing with the problem, guaranteed, eventually is going to be us dealing with. We're going to have to manage these animals different. What does this mean? You want me to tell you what it means in the future? I'll tell you right now. A lot of what this is going to be is biological radio management systems, acoustical management systems. I talked about acoustical a little bit already. Now basically, biological emotional radio sets means that you can set up biological emotion fences, which means that you get closer and closer to something and they feel these energies, and it can be attractive or repellent. There's different ways to do it. There can also be what's known as mind-dampening nullifiers. It's complicated to explain that, other than the fact that what it does is it mellows your brain out. And it basically jams part of your brain from having violent psychotic tendencies. There's been a lot of work in these areas. China's done a lot of work in these areas, by the way. Don't want to go there. People are going to talk about what happened there. That's for another time, to talk about that another time. But because it goes all the way back to the 20s. Actually, World War II was the big one. A lot of research was captured back then to understand what happened. So, but the animal translations into this is we have new methodologies respective to how we're going to be able to deal with these technologies, how we're going to be able to integrate them with drones, and how in some cases you're going to have to do catch and release. That's going to end up putting, in some cases, electronics in the heads of some creatures. So, if you can imagine a mountain lion that decides it's just going to go into the area, it's going to go into your district home area, it's going to run all around it, wants things out of the trash can or whatever, and then it decides it wants to go eat a 3-year-old. Well, that's not necessarily going to work. Now, how if you have a circuit in there that if a little 3-year-old or human being is crying, there's a signature to it, by the way, that would activate the remote implant in the lion to mellow it out. So what are you going to do right now? You're saving the life of the child. You just mellowed out the animal. You just saved the life of the animal too. So if we sit down and we begin the long series of discussions of stewardship and animal management to guarantee that we don't end up with extinct species, and accept the fact that we might have to accept some of these other options. And what are these options going to be? There's a lot of work that has to be done. And we have to sit down wisely and discuss this. There's a lot of work that has to be done. But we can end up doing this. But 500 years from now, we're talking, everything's going to evolve. It's going to be a different situation. And we're definitely going to be talking about what these systems are going to be, as far as we might have hikers going in the most wild areas you can imagine. And wild creatures manage to reasonably get along. And what? Not actually get upset. We've already got a lot of areas where the bears are begging too much. This isn't a joke. The bears are begging, and they get upset, maybe they're going to scratch you. A lot of them won't do that. Or if they do it, it's accidental. They just, some of them, they're turning into dogs. They want to be your buddy. People tell you, you don't want them to do that. But again, we're talking about a lot of stuff. Now, wildlife original thought, transitional management. When you're talking about understand the transitional management and genetic tendencies, and you want to be concerned about preserving original wildlife tendencies, then you're talking about using your implant technology in a completely different way. You're talking about actually adding formats of custom construct to basically rile them. We're going to make you psychotic. We're going to make you think erratically. We're going to transmit signature patterns to genetically keep you stable. instead of having your biological radio continuous reflection showing a tendency of another direction, which is going to cause a genetic mutation change. So again, these are deep things to talk about. There's a lot of work that has to be talked about these different areas. And but we can do this. We can become stewards. We can realize that there is a lot of different ways that we can do things. And then we can also harvest and retransmit the emotions. We can understand more about these animals while we leave them in a completely born-free state. We just have to understand more about technology, more about medical sciences, more about this, that, and the other thing, and realize that we have to be stewards. And we have to look about what is the 500,000 year thing going to look like. And we better understand what that looks like. Because now is the time, right now is the time when we need to sit down as stewards and say, what are we going to do right now to understand how we're going to have that effect translate into what? What does it translate out into 500 years from now? Because we're here right now. So stewardship. It's a big problem. So we're talking about finding the harmony between all the balances, which means, yes, the animals are going to have to get used to integrations with people, but then we're going to have to also make sure that they got their born-free states and they get stimulated to keep their original aspects, so that we're not going to genetically damage them so that they genetically no longer breed. Now, there's some complexities. Is there going to be a percentage of them going to be turned into pets? How are we going to work this? This has to be talked about, and then you have certain types of creatures that, they fall in the category where we need the meat. I'm sorry, but this is reality. We have to look at this. So at this point, I've got plenty of time now. We're 52 minutes. I've got to bring this to a close. So there's a lot more to cover in these areas to become better stewards.